Hey, Dr. Fogel, this is Seth Ostrowski with my presentation on the Amber Room, Disappearance and Mystery of the Eighth Wonder of the World. It's a little late because I couldn't figure out how to submit the link, and then when I submitted it, I realized there was no audio. I was on my desktop computer earlier, and now I'm on my laptop, and I didn't realize I had to reconfigure the audio. That's my bad. I hope you don't dock points, but I understand if you do because it's not on time. But anyways, this is my presentation on the Amber Room. It was once considered an eighth wonder of the world, and it's also about how the theft from the Nazis, or by the Nazis, led to its ultimate disappearance. When people think amber now, they probably think Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs, amber mosquito, but amber gemstones were among a very highly sought after group of minerals like gold and all of those other things, especially back in 1701 when the room was built. When the room was built, it was more of a status icon, like a very, well, it still would be today, but very, very, very wealthy room. So, the eighth wonder. This photo is the only known color photo of the Amber Room. Let me move my camera. This is the only color photo of the Amber Room that exists, which was taken in 1917. The construction, like I said, began in 1701. It was made of amber and gold with a lot of other gemstones mixed in. Estimates I saw said it could be worth at least $100 million in today's currency. It was considered an eighth wonder for this reason. It was a very, very impressive, modern, built I don't want to say contraption, but it's like a puzzle. So it was very, very impressive, especially for the time it was built. There was golden furniture items, tables, chandeliers, murals, mosaics rather. It was very incredible stuff. I found a Guinness World Record that listed the room as the most valuable piece of missing furniture at 142 million. I don't think Guinness World Record is a very accurate source, but I thought that was interesting and funny. But another source said 176 million. The price is really vary, and we can't say for sure without having it in front of us. But anyways, the room was designed and built in collaboration with a German sculptor named Andreas Schluter and a Danish craftsman named Gottfried Wolfram. It was designed for Frederick I, King of Prussia, and in 1716 the king gifted the room to Peter the Great of Russia as a sign of peace between the two countries. I specify that a German sculptor worked on the room. That'll be important later. The Nazis, of course, stole it. The Amber Room would end up staying in the Winter Palace for a time before it was moved to the Catherine Palace, which is a palace in St. Petersburg, and it was expanded upon, eventually using more amber from Germany and the craftsmanship of Italian designer Bartolomeo Francesco Rastrelli. The room does not exist today, unfortunately, or maybe it does. We will see, because during World War II, the Nazis looted it, along with thousands of other art pieces they stole, and to this day it remains a mystery of where it is. So, old versus new. I couldn't find dates for all the photos in my presentation, but I tried. So, the one on the left is an old black and white photo taken. The one on the right is a new version that was taken around 2014. You'll notice that it's a new version because, while it's not the original Amber Room, it is the replica made over the course of, I believe, 23 to 25 years. The sources varied on that. It was rebuilt basically from the ground up using just black and white photos and that one color photo I showed. Very impressive. I'm not even sure how it's possible. They just had the photos and had fragments that was left of the room in the palace, and over 23 years they rebuilt it from scratch, and it was a very accurate replica. So it's still in display in St. Petersburg. Anybody can view it, I believe. It's no longer in the Catherine Palace. It's in the Tsarskoye Selo State Museum and Heritage Site. But anyways, Nazi capture of the room. Bad news. So the room, we have to discuss why it was stolen in the first place. Really, if you didn't know what the room was, you might wonder how a room could even be stolen. But it's because it was crafted in a special way where it was able to be taken apart into several pieces and transported, reassembled in a different place at a different location. When it was first gifted to Peter the Great, it was shipped in 18 different boxes, and when the Nazis disassembled the room, they had to take it apart and pack into 27 separate crates. I saw those two different crate numbers. I think it's because the Italian added more pieces of amber to it, and that's why it took more storage. But anyways, the image of the touch and smell mosaic in the workshop is an example of this. It was a piece of the amber room that was actually recovered. It's, I believe, the only large piece recovered of the amber room, which I'll talk about more later. Essentially, they had to have these big rectangular frames that they would just stick onto the wall, and it's very interesting how it was able to be transported, but it obviously led to some issues where the Nazis ended up stealing it when they invaded Russia, because amber is very delicate. The Russian art curators couldn't really move it. They tried, but it started to crumble, so they put wallpaper over it. That didn't work because the Nazis found it, of course, and they were able to simply steal it. I believe over 36 hours they removed the entire thing from the palace and took it away. They ended up putting it in Königsberg Castle in Königsberg, which I believe was a territory of Prussia, maybe Germany at the time. So I did try and find a photo of it in Königsberg Castle, but I was unsuccessful, so I just got a regular, standard, run-of-the-mill photo of Hitler looking at a piece of stolen art. And I also got a picture of the destroyed Königsberg, because actually, once the Allies invaded, they bombed the entire city, which is why the record of where it could be is so very blurry, basically. So we know for certain that the Amber Room was moved and reassembled in that castle, but what we don't know is what happened to it after. Some people say it might not even left the castle, but anyways, it would stay in the castle until the Allied invasion, when it was packaged and ready to be moved, but this is the last time it was seen. It was bombed by Allies, turning it to ruins, but no signs of the Amber Room remained in the wreckage. So, how did it disappear? We really don't know, but there's many theories about it. We have not recovered it today, but it has led to quite a few different hunts to find the room, with no luck so far, but maybe sometimes finding jewelry and other fabled things. At one point, a shipwreck was found, as I showed as the news article, but no, it was not the location of the Amber Room. Several of these shipwrecks have been found, I believe. Some people say it may have never left the castle and a bomb could have destroyed it, but with it being made of gold, I found that pretty unlikely. I showed the Notre Dame cross because it's made of gold as well, and during the fire it survived because gold has a very high melting point. It's very hard to destroy it. I believe it'd be impossible for there to be no remains of the Amber Room left after the bombing. People say that it could be deep in the castle, but with modern technology they searched it and did not find anything besides some jewelry that was in a secret spot of the basement. So more theories. There's some very outlandish ones as well. It was meant to be upkept in a museum environment because of the amber, which, as I said, was very fragile and brittle. It could break. So we think that now it could be a very much a shell of its former self, very unrecognizable today. It was so big, but it remains lost, and this could be why it could simply have crumbled to mostly nothing. It could be simply at the bottom of the ocean. It could be dust in some way, as I've shown, in a shipwreck that was never located. It couldn't have left the face of the earth. It has to be somewhere, but there are plenty of crazy theories, like how the Germans stole a fake Amber Room and Russia still keeps the real one, but because Russia displayed all the art they stole from Germany, I find it unlikely that they would hide that. I also saw a source that said that Russia destroyed the castle after the war. So people say that maybe they destroyed anything that was left of the Amber Room, but I also think this is quite unlikely. They would have at least searched the castle. Anyways. So back to the restoration. This is one of the only good parts of the story. It's very much not a fun story, but the Amber Room will never be a memory because a full replica exists in Russia. It took 23 years and a lot of time and effort. The sculptors basically just had the references that were black and white photos, one color photo, and then they had little fragments that were left of the Amber Room when it was stolen, like a box, basically, of these little scraps. And using the curator, who was still alive, of the museum's knowledge, they were able to rebuild it over 23 years. It got very tough because at one point the Soviet Union fell and the funding for the project was cut because since it was made of such valuable materials like amber, it ended up having to be funded by the government just to get the material to build it. The funding was almost cut, but they were able to raise private funding to complete the vision. Also, a good help came in the form that was the mosaic I mentioned earlier that was found. So let's talk about the mosaic. The touch and smell mosaic was rediscovered in 1997. I find this story pretty much a miracle. It's very shocking that this thing survived. And how it survived really came down to the greed of a Nazi soldier, because in 1997, a man tried to sell this piece. His father was the Nazi soldier, but the son had no idea where the panel had come from. Our detectives raided his lawyer's office because they were tipped off that an Amber Room piece was being sold, and they found it. The man had, I guess, no idea that it was even part of an Amber Room, a missing piece of art. He just had it in his house from his dad, basically, his Nazi dad who had died years ago. He is very likely to have stolen the mosaic during the time where the Amber Room was being moved out of Königsberg Castle to avoid Allied bombing. He very likely stole a piece of it for himself. And what's very funny to me is that, and also why I think this Amber Room could very well still be out there in pieces, is because this man had no idea it was part of the Amber Room. He had it hung above his couch at one point, and he thought it was so ugly he moved it to his basement. I just find that hysterical. So the recovered piece, which you can see here, is made of, I believe, porcelain as the mosaic. It's very cool, and it was able to be relocated to Russia in 1997, 6 years before the restoration was complete, and it was able to be a great help to them as a source. So, treasure hunting. This is a weird little tangent I want to go on, but there was this tale I found where people were searching the Amber Room and dying. I think it's a superstition, but there were a couple sources where people would say, for example, Alfred Roda, the Königsberg Castle director, and his wife died of typhus while the KGB was investigating them. A Russian officer talked to a reporter about the room and then died in a car accident. This guy named Georg Stein, who was a hunter of the room, was very disturbingly found dead in a forest with his stomach cut open via a scalpel in a ritualistic, strange, creepy way. I think that was likely just someone who had it out for him. But people say it could be the KGB. They're trying to hide a secret Russian treasure. But anyways, beyond these oddities, the treasure hunts have become widely unfruitful because despite finding some treasure occasionally, it's nothing close to the Amber Room, which could be worth incredible, like $100 million. It's still very nice, though, because the memory of this Amber Room does live on in the eyes of many, many people, and we can see the very cool restoration, despite the original maybe being dust long ago from a bomb. It could be under the water and just absolutely destroyed in a shipwreck, but it's not a total cultural loss for these Russian people, because this restoration does a great job in recapturing the original magic that you would observe if you ever visited the Amber Room. So I believe that the missing room, while it represents what the Russians lost in the war, they have at least gained back a piece of that. Especially the mosaic, which actually is an original part of the... I'll go back to this photo of the room. I find this fascinating. This man is using it as a reference, essentially, in his office. And I couldn't find a good source on whether this original mosaic is still being displayed there. I saw one that said it was kept in storage and occasionally brought out. I saw another one that said it was actually still being used as part of the replica of the room. But regardless, the story will continue as people continue to search for it, and it will undoubtedly live in the minds of many people. That is about it. So hopefully you found that interesting. I'm sure you've heard this story before, but I really appreciate this semester. It was a very cool class. Thank you very much.